Now, we don't have a lot of time to digest or to go into a lot of detail about all of the points that were brought up in the film that you remembered or wrote down.
Well, I just like to remind us that most of us are custodians of some piece of land somewhere, and so I think what we do with the little bit of poison perfect grass around us also relates. Enough said.
I like Dr. Frank. I wanted to say, wait a minute, I want to back up. And she's the kind of person I feel can really help us in the health area. And I don't know well, she touches people, but I think she does. And I liked her to explain more about the ozone and the sunlight and the impact of sunlight on ozone. You know, we have a vice presidential candidate who has been impacted by that. He has cancer, and we have to pray for him. So I liked her.
One of the things, I'm Jean Terpstra, one of the things I liked about Dr. Frank's comments was she made the point that if we properly prepare for the impact of these hotter, summers and the drought conditions and the floods, that a lot of the disease and stuff might be avoided. She kept saying they might have an increase, but emphasize that there's things we can do to prepare for the changes if we acknowledge them and start working.
That's a beautiful segue into the third speaker, who also talked about prepare. You can go into the surprise mode or the prepared mode. Okay, his name was what? Dr. Richards. Are you ready to move to Dr. Richards, or okay? Let's do that.
I'm David O'Neill. One thing that really surprised me from what Dr. Richards said was what he said about one of the biggest limitations in getting the wind and solar energy out there was the lack of technicians. And I always kind of assumed that it was people weren't willing to pay the high prices and economic things like that. But the fact that it's people to do those jobs was kind of encouraging in that it's if we can get the news out there that hey, these are jobs that are needed, people will step up and fill those jobs.
My name is Joyce Felton, and there are two things. One is I was interested in the comments he made about storage of CO2, and the other was the difference between the carbon footprint in Indiana compared to the other states, that we use almost twice as much carbon-based energy as the rest of the country.
My name is Chuck Deppert. One of the things, and I'm working for the Pew Environmental Trust, so anxious to talk to a lot of you. Anyhow, one of the things I disagreed with what he said was that the cap and trade money that's generated could be used to reduce taxes. That ain't going to happen. We've seen too many of those tricks. What the cap and trade money could be used for is to incentivize people to weatherize and create green jobs. That will work, but to think that we're going to capture all this money in the process and reduce taxes, I just think it's far-fetched.
One of the good things about being who we are, we don't have to agree with everybody to respect each other. So some good, honest disagreement is helpful because it makes us all better. Let's have one more comment about Dr. Richards' talk, and then we'll move on to the others.
I thought it was interesting the way he showed that if we got national legislation, that it might take us time to catch up, and we might be inconvenienced unless we followed this prepared mode, as he put it. Also, there are a lot of states, like California and some others, who are really trying to move ahead on environmentally sound practices, and our national government has not caught up, and in fact, they're impeding progress. So I think these trade-offs we'll have to watch in the future, and I think that also impacts where we stand in the election.
Thank you for coming today, Father Arden. It's always a pleasure to have you nearby.
I was also very struck by the idea of the moral imperative, and was just reflecting that, you know, sometimes we tend to compartmentalize our problems, and to recognize that this is very integral to most of our social issues, poverty being the one that Father concentrated on. And just that, you know, the earlier speakers talked about maybe our forest kind of shifting, and the one who was the health person kind of talked about populations might shift. And I think, you know, we could reflect a bit on the way that our social problems have shifted over the years and might very well be connected with the climate. It's maybe something we don't often think about, but it certainly goes to the heart of our faith.
My name is Ann O'Neill, and I just wanted to comment that a brief look into American history will reveal that some of our greatest movers and shakers have been from our religious communities, and I'm just encouraged by the idea that if we draw them into this concern of ours, that perhaps then that will be a catalyst for real change. And so I just thank those people in our religious community who are trying to bridge that gap.
Thank you. My name is Ed Cohen, and first of all, Father Hart, thank you for your very kind and generous comments. And yes, beyond the financial, technical, and governance issue, we really are facing a moral issue. And the faith communities in and around Indianapolis are beginning to hear and step up. The Care for Creation Committee is aware now of the 19th congregation in the city to form a green team and institutionalize this effort. So it is happening, and word is getting out. So be of good heart. It is happening. It's not happening fast enough, but it is happening. Thank you.
All right, there's one more speaker. We'll move on. There's one more speaker in our series here, and that's Mayor Brainerd from Carmel. Do you want to say something about that, Carol?
Yes, I do. I'm a South Sider, and every time I have to go to the North Side and I get and run into those roundabouts, makes me a nervous wreck. But I'm getting used to them as I go north a little more. But when I found out today that it saves 24,000 gallons of gas a year and decreases accidents and all of the other good things about it, I'll be thinking more kindly about them and maybe see what we can do on the South Side. Thank you.
And I wanted to say that from watching the DVD and then listening to the comments, I think that if we start with the end in mind, that it won't create so many problems. And what I mean by that is that from the different businesses that we open up to how we treat one another, you know, it affects all of us, not only just, you know, each individual, but it affects nature. So if we start with the end in mind when we're opening businesses, when we're thinking about natural resources, you know, it won't create so many problems if we just start with the end in mind on how it affects all of us and how it affects the earth. So if we would have done this years ago, we might not be in this situation. So we need to keep that in mind. Always keep the end result in mind.
Well, this is just the beginning of a lot of dialogue I hope that we can have today in the workshops that will be held this afternoon.
The headline I would put in my story would be about the tulip trees dying, because I've read that that trees absorb the carbon dioxide out of the air and let out fresh air. And without trees, eventually the United States and even the world won't be able to breathe. And if you can't breathe, you won't be able to survive.